So I'm standing at these mountains, and there's volcanoes, and I'm alone, and all of a sudden I see blood pouring out of these volcanoes, and I'm like freaked out. I said, "Am I in hell?" And I looked over, and there's a very tall Asian man. He's got a hat on, and he's got a long stick. And I said, "Am I in hell?" And he says, "Do you think you are?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, is it?" He says, "No, you're at the cleansing pool." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, is that blood? Is that?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, does it hurt?" He said, "Did it?"
Good evening and welcome to the show, or to the other side. I'm your host, John Glasspool, and tonight I'm speaking with Bonnie Jennings, who had an NDE back in 2019, and she's also written a book called My Near-Death Experience, and she is here to tell us all about her experience. Bonnie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Let's go back to the day that it happened, when you had your NDE. What happened that day?
Since it dealt with anaphylactic shock, I'm going to start when it occurred. However, when I talk about this is not me saying don't get the vaccine. Okay. I'm not a non-vacciner. Okay. This is a political thing. I am allergic and have been allergic to the flu vaccine. So, in the position that I was working, I had to go get the flu vaccine in November of 2018. And within 1 week after getting it, um, I was either to resign or get the vaccine. Okay. And I'm an asthmatic and I can't wear a mask 8 hours a day. So I got the vaccine, and within 1 week, both eyes had dilated and they stayed dilated. And I went to three different doctors, two ophthalmologists and one regular doctor, and no one could really figure out what had happened, except they kept telling me I touched a medication with my fingers. And I've been a nurse for 20 some odd years and have touched thousands of drugs with my fingers and have never had dilation of the eyes. And not only that, as a nurse, we go and wash our hands all the time. As soon as you touch a med, you go wash your hand. So that was not it. And my doctor knew that too. She knew that was a bunch of bull. Anyway, I'm not telling you to run out and not get any vaccine. That's not it. This was before the COVID. So anyway, let's get to February the 8th when when it occurred. Um, as the dilation started, my body started swelling. I started feeling horrible. And so by the time I only could work nights at that point because my eyes were so dilated. So I got home the next morning from working and I was sick. I mean, and my son was here and he made this fabulous gourmet meal, and I love gourmet food, and I couldn't touch it. It just, and so that was about noon. And from noon until midnight is very boring. I knew I was sick. I knew I needed to get to the emergency room, but I was too confused to get there. And so I remember the newsman at nighttime saying, "This is the coldest night of the year, and don't go out on the roads because there's ice out there." And so I said to myself, "Well, you just picked a fine night to die." And so I think before I even finished that thought, I was standing, and I don't even remember hitting the ground. I was gone. And so that was the evening of the 8th. Well, the next morning, my children told me I was on the phone talking to them, which is weird. Okay, I don't know how to put those pieces together, but they called EMS and they worked on me. My son told me they worked on me for an hour before they got me to the hospital. The hospital's 12 hours from the house. And they stopped, pulled over often to give me CPR. Anyway, being a nurse, I've been involved in some CPRs, not a lot, but quite a few. And never, ever did we ever give EMS or give anybody CPR for any length of time. That just, I mean, 30 minutes I think was about the longest, and according to my son, this went on an hour or more. So anyway, I get to the ER and they put me in ICU, and I wake up a few days later and I have tubes and the whole thing going down my throat, and I've been intubated. That's why I'm raspy. I apologize for that. But I wake up and I'm my mind has gone without oxygen. When you die, I'm talking about die. I'm not talking about near death. I'm talking about dying. When you die and you go without oxygen, that's breath and respirations to any part of your body. The tissues in your body die. And so in my brain tissue, some of it perished, and part of my leg, my left leg is pretty much gone now, and both of my feet can't feel them. But the tissues were damaged, and I awakened to that I had survived. But I guess this is where I need to start about the NDE. When I was in the hospital, and I don't know at the time when my NDE started, but I awakened in what I call pods. And I have a picture of it in the book that I just wrote. And in the book, I have them colored. But in reality, when I was there, they were not colored. They were very cloudy. They had a cloudy feeling to them. And so we each have our pod, and inside that pod, we do our creation. Okay. So that pod is actually our consciousness pod. And later we'll get into that pod being in the Akashic library, which at the time I did not know what the word Akashic meant. In that Akashic field is where we create everything that we know. Okay, we create our world. So I suppose if you were religious, you would create your world, what you believe and what you think. If you're like me, you might create your own world. My whole NDE was more, I call it scientific and mathematical, even though I saw incidences that were with beings. And so I woke up and I had gotten out of my pod, and I had said out loud, "Hey, I'm awake now. I need to get out of here." And immediately something or someone came to me. I didn't see them, and they took me out of the pod and set me down. And when I sat down, or I stood up, or whatever I was doing, I was immediately, and let me back up here. There is no time. I know you've heard that before, but in the pod, in our consciousness, in the afterlife, there is not a timeline. There's only a timeline here. So when I give you the events, it sounds like it's on a timeline, but in actuality, I don't know. I don't know what came first, second, or third. It's just that my brain put it together in this order because it makes sense, okay, to me. So I'm standing at these mountains, and there's volcanoes, and I'm alone, and all of a sudden I see blood pouring out of these volcanoes, and I'm like freaked out. I said, "Am I in hell?" And I looked over, and there's a very tall Asian man. He's got a hat on, and he's got a long stick. And I said, "Am I in hell?" And he says, "Do you think you are?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, is it?" He says, "No, you're at the cleansing pool." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, is that blood? Is that?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, does it hurt?" He said, "Did it?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, every time you ascend," and he didn't say the word ascend, but every time you go up, you have to come and get cleansed. So so each step of your way, you will come to get cleansed. And I said, okay, great. So with that, I was at the next scene. And again, I don't know if it's on the timeline. I'm standing in a desert and I'm looking out into the desert, and it's not hot. There's no temperature, but the sand is very dry and I am alone. And I look off into the distance, and I mean, there is a huge stone. I say it's about 18 feet high and really, really thick. And it's dark and it's very matted looking. And from the distance, it rolls up to my feet. And I'm looking at, I touch it, and it's just stone. It's just solid. And I look at it, I'm thinking, well, what does it mean? It has no writing on it. There's nothing on it. And all of a sudden, the 5 to 6 o'clock position on the stone opens up. And I look inside, and it's like inviting me, come on in. And so I painted, in my book, I painted a picture of it. So I walk into the 5 or 6 position, and this is where I meet the being that I'm with. And it was, hi, how are you? There was no, we just knew each other. And I couldn't tell if the being was a male or female. And my daughter has said to me, Mom, that's your mother. And it actually, the being could be. I don't know. They don't identify themselves, but there is a common, so good to see you feeling. And so the being reaches down. We're in a desert again, and the being holds up sand in their hand, the dirt, and they let it slide through their hands, and then they hand me some, and I'm like looking at this dirt, and the dirt is so fascinating because it's got gold and silvers and minerals and irons and ores and all the beauties. I mean, there's bacteria and viruses, all sorts of things in this dirt. I'm just letting it sprinkle from my hands, and as I do that, I can see into a quantum existence of what's beneath our feet. Is just, I mean, we're living in a 3-dimensional world, and what's all around us is so many more dimensions. I mean, it's just layered upon layered upon layered, and just fascinating. And so from there, we proceeded to the Sumerian tablets, and I wanted to get to the Sumerian tablets because that meant more to me than any part of this journey, I believe. And I recognized that I had more than likely been there at the forming of those stones, and I knew they became so familiar to me, and I knew that I had been there. I knew that I had read those tablets, and they meant so much to me. And that was probably one of the most memorable parts of my journey that I remember. And so my guide said, come on, let's go. And we weren't in a hurry, but the guide was thrilled. Come on, there's a lot to see. You're going to love seeing this. And I said, okay. So we took off, and we're still on Earth, and I can see my hair. I mean, we're like flying through the air, and we're traveling by the speed of thought. And so we're going off, and we fly to the pyramids, and I see the pyramids, and oh, it's just absolutely fabulous. And it's just, oh, this just means so much to me. This is just, oh, so real. And I was here during that time, and wow. Anyway, from there, we went down to Peru, and we flew past Machu Picchu, and then up towards the Mayan temples and Mexico into the temples there. And that also was very, very, very familiar. And that was just magnificent because I saw it in the original form, not how it is today, but how it was originally. And so the being says to me, come on, we've got to go. And I said, okay. So we took off, we left Earth, and the being said to me, are you ready? Are you prepared? I said, for what? And they said, just brace yourself. And so I don't know, okay. And so we entered into a huge spacecraft, and it was around Orion's belt. And my guide was behind me a little bit. We walked into a room that had a long table that wasn't really physically seen, but there were lights coming up from underneath it, and nothing is physical there. And the being said to me, "Have a seat in the chair," and there was no chair, but I sat down, and suddenly I stood up because in walked five beings of alien or ET, and I was just, wow. And I was like a child, and I said, "Who are you? Our human DNA?" And they going, "Yes, we are." And so they're five. So I took it that the five meant they were over all human beings. I could be mistaken because they might only be my DNA, but initially I thought, oh, they're over everybody. And so there were five of them, and they were very serious. They were not necessarily friendly. The one on the end was the friendliest. Okay, there were five. At the furthest end from me was a very tall white being, never gave me eye contact. They had books or something in their hand, and they sat down. Being number four, I never actually remembered. Number three was bluish in color. Seems to me that it had beak and real birdie kind of eyes. Number two, I can't remember. And number one was a very small grayish man who had a mustache. He was the guy, he was the friendly one, the one who was polite. And he said, "Here, please have a seat and make yourself comfortable." And I did. And so I think this is where my review was. Now, I'm the type of person who, if it's scary or intimidating, I will blank it out, you know? And so this part of it is fairly blanked out. Um, so I judge myself pretty harshly. And so if there was anything intimidating, I would, oh, I don't want to hear that. You know, it would be, I can't do that. So I let that go. And so it was, this part of it was finished. And I had the feeling they didn't like me, which when it was time to go, did not have that feeling anymore. At that point in time, I knew you're acceptable. I was taken to another craft, another spacecraft that was, or part of that one. I can't remember if it was part of that one or another one, but they were all nestled together. And I walked in, there was a whole bunch of alien beings that were working at the flight deck. And they said to me, okay, I'm not for sure, I need to back up, because when I was sitting in the room at my judgment, they handed me sheets of binary codes. And they said, "Read these for us." And I'm going, "I don't read binary code." And they said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I don't." And they handed me the binary codes, and I must have read them. And at that point is when they said, "Okay, you're all right," you know. So we get up to the other spacecraft, and I said to them, they said, "Come on in here into this other room," and they turned on the computer system, and there you could see star charts of galaxies and the universes, and different things would pop up, and they would say, "What's that? What's that? Tell us where that is. Where's that? How do you get there? What's the name of that?" Well, in World War II, my father had been a navigator. As a child, he had taught me a great deal of this. And so I was able to answer these questions. And so at that point, these men took the papers that the binary codes were written on, and they took them and threw them at their feet and burned them. And they had such great fun doing that. I don't know why, but it was part of their pleasure. And so, okay. So they said to me, well, you're free to go. We're going to open up the back door and you may go anywhere you want in this universe because we know that you know where you're going. And I said, okay. They did send a youngish male with me. And the only communication we did was a nod, like "Thank you for being here," and there wasn't any real, you know, what's this or what's that. Um, so we get up around the Elohim, and I'm not a I'm no longer, I don't want to get into the religious thing, but I don't practice that way anymore. But the Elohim came into my NDE, and Jordan Maxwell, a week before my NDE, was teaching about the Elohim, and it was plural for gods, and so that's what I saw. I saw that in the outer edges of the universe, and the Elohim itself looked like a witch's wand. It was very silvery light, okay, and off the end had tentacles, lights, where the sparkles at the end, and the Elohim would cast across the skies these numbers, these formulas, these algebraic formulas, physics, and all things. He was showing me how everything is, and Saturn to Jupiter, from Jupiter to Earth, there were numbers that were constantly changing and moving. It was the dynamics and the pressure and everything involved in the heavens, and including us, the human life, whether we took a breath or we moved, or me speaking or you speaking, or everything was energy. And that's what I saw. Everything, you can't move, I can't speak to you unless there's a mathematical expression that's been designed prior to me talking to you, or vice versa. Okay. So everything is made up mathematically. And so to me, when I recognize, wow, that is the God, which I don't even like using that word anymore because it's so small, it's human. So it was like, that is the supreme force. It's just a mathematical, whoa, it's amazing. And do I think it's like the Matrix? In a way, but I didn't see the scary part of the movie. I didn't see that part. I saw the part of the mathematics and the electricity, how everything is, the dead space, the regular space, everything is filled. So, meanwhile, while I'm out having this experience in the background, in the far background, all along, I've heard my sister, who's in the ICU with me, saying, Bonnie, you got to come home now. And she and I both talk to my deceased mother all the time. So she's going, I talked to mother and she said, it's not your time. You need to come home. Come home. Who's going to take care of all these animals? And I had 5 animals at the time. Nobody's going to take care of them. You've got to come home and take care of these animals. And at first I didn't pay attention to her because the freedom felt so wonderful to be away from all the, just all the pressure of having to live and supply, and so as the Elohim was creating this fabulous nebulous, it's saying to me, isn't this absolutely beautiful? And I said, yes, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the Elohim said, I don't create anything that's not beautiful. Everything I make is beautiful, and I don't point fingers at anything. And so meanwhile, I hear my sister, please come back. And I'm like, oh, okay, okay. I've got to go back and take care of these animals because the Elohim is expecting me to go back and take care of my animal life. And so I decided to slip through the body. And I forgot to mention one of the first things that I did when I met my guide, when I crossed over, I didn't have lights, I didn't have tunnels, I didn't have angels meeting me, I had no family. And so I was really upset about not having a tunnel. And so, so funny, as I come back into my body, um, the guides at that point in time, there's more than one. They're standing at that tunnel and they're sending me back through a purple tunnel. And as I'm sliding back into my body through the purple tunnel, they're going to me, don't forget love. Love is the glue that holds everything together. Don't forget it. And that is my NDE in a nutshell.
The conversation that you overheard of your sister, like, at that point, did you, or I mean, after that, did you validate this with her? Did you have a conversation with her? And
I did. I did validate it with her. Yes. Uh-huh.
what did she say about
Yes.
it? Well, when you communicated with your guides and whomever else, was it always in the form of telepathy?
Always telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And actually, that was one of my requests when I got up there, is to be able to hear better. And my guy said, really? You need to do that? And I said, well, yeah, I would. He says, you need to hear better. Think about it, because you're no longer hearing with ears. You are hearing, and you're not seeing with eyes. Your conscious is gathering the information, you're perceiving through your consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the entire time, so did you have an energetic body, a light body, or was it just like a physical body? Or
Did I have a what
because I
body?
know at
What kind
one
of body?
point you had mentioned seeing your hair flowing and
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
So I was just wondering if you had a physical body throughout this whole experience, or if it was
I
more like a
did.
light
And I think
body.
I sent you the picture that I saw myself as the blonde. uh, and I laugh about it in my book, because I sent you a picture, but in the afterlife, that picture is who I saw myself the whole time. I never looked away from that angle. Okay. And I never looked down, I never looked up. And it really occurred to me about a month ago that that's how I saw myself. I wonder if others saw me that way too. I think they see you however they want to see you, but that's how I saw me.
After it happened, did you remember everything, or did it sort of come back to you over
It,
time?
I remember the basics of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started writing about it that things started opening up to me. And in fact, so I'm in communication with the being that I drew a picture of that's in my book. I believe it's him, her. I'm in communication with that being quite often. And when I say I'm in communication, a lot of times I'm driving in the car and that being will start speaking to me. And it's like, I don't have any way to pull over on the side right now to write this down. And you know that I can't remember these things. So would you please hold off on that and tell me later? Can you remind me? Because I'll be I'll get home and I'll have totally forgotten what they told me, but it was, it was important at that moment. So, like last night, dreams are very informative every night. They're every night. My dreams are getting more and more and more, and I've always been a dreamer. So now they're almost like a really, really, really real. Um, and I wrote something on Facebook this morning about a dream I had early this morning, and about a being coming to me and talking to me. He'd been in a car accident, but he didn't know that he had been in one. And so that's separate from my guides, but I get a lot of, every night I get something giving me a new message. It might not be important, it might be something casual, which I think in the beginning, right after my NDE, they were more important than they are now. Because after my NDE, okay, now remember I had pretty severe head trauma. And so for about a year and a half, part of my brain was still connected to that event. And so lots of stuff was just pouring into me all day long. And that's kind of backed off a little bit now, unfortunately. But at the same time, I'm using my brain more in a in a necessary manner. But it wasn't like I was part of the earth at that point. I was somebody said to me I was a hierophant. The hierophant is between earth and heavens. And so that's where I felt like I was. I was a hierophant.
Do you recall the first time you opened up about your experience with anybody, whether it's family member?
I opened up immediately. I told my sister, but I had been intubated, so she can't really understand what I'm saying. I told my best friend, who was an art therapist, and she said to me, "You need to draw these. You draw," and I said to her, "I can't draw that. You're asking me to draw a 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional image, and this is a 3-dimensional world, and that's impossible. I can't do it." She said, "Well, then draw your feelings, draw the color, draw something that reflects something about it." And so I just started drawing, and I just couldn't stop.
How would you say that the experience has changed your life?
Absolutely. Oh my God. I came back immediately as a vegetarian.
Okay.
My political views changed. They had already changed, but I mean, changed. I have a list of things that changed. I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but all of us, including myself, always stay open for possibilities. I don't know it all. I'm not a know it all. And I would never want to be labeled one. I think that getting too rigid is a dangerous thing. Just stay open. And if you're one of these people that are wanting a UFO and you want to run out there and say, "Hey, take me," don't do that either, because there are good guys and there are bad guys, and you need to be on the guard. I mean, you just have to be protective of yourself, because the beings that love you, they don't want you to do that.
Once again, Bonnie, for sharing your experiences.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely wonderful. I appreciate you very much, and God
Thank
bless.
you. I'll talk later. Okay. Bye-bye.